What's up, guys? ATCG here. Welcome back. And today we're taking a different step in our kind of videos. Usually, this channel is mostly about the meta, the decks that are most competitive, but it feels nice to get a step ahead and look at the anime, look at the decks that haven't actually been relevant or decks that haven't been even released yet, which is what this video is all about. Today we're going to talk about the top 10 anime exclusive decks that Konami has either never printed or printed very few cards from the archetypes. And this is a segment that I think is very interesting because Konami has been releasing all these old fan favorite anime exclusive decks that we never had for like 10 or more years. Usually they print these kinds of decks in Battles of Legends, so I think some of these I'm going to mention today might get printed really soon, especially the Vrains decks have a better chance of being released because they're the more recent ones. Other decks that have been around for ever since the DM or GX era and haven't been released yet, then these decks might not be under Konami's radar to be released soon. But you never know. We did get some pretty cool decks recently, so I'm just going to mention the top 10, in my opinion, that I would love Konami to print, and they're in the order that I would want them to get printed. So let's begin. Number 10, Storm Riders. Storm Rider is a deck that Windy used in Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains. It's kind of similar to the new Simorgh archetype that got printed in Rising Rampage. It technically is support for Simorgh, but it was a whole new deck because Simorgh was never an archetype. And they work if you have no cards in your spell and trap zone, and they deal with your opponent's back row, and they take advantage of your opponent's back row. And it's a link deck, of course, it's Vrains based, and it link climbs from link 1, 2, and 3, and it had a link 4. And that's pretty much how it went, because you link climb, you deal with your opponent's back row, and you overpower it. Keep in mind that most of these decks need improvements in order to even be viable, because in the anime it's not like real life, and these decks would really need a buff. If they were printed just how they were in the anime, it would be cool to have them, but they would not be that usable. Number 9, Fossils, Jim Crocodile Cook from the GX era. Jim's deck is a deck that I think had a lot of potential for a deck back in GX era because it used an interesting fusion summoning. It fused monsters from your graveyard and monsters from your opponent's graveyard, and it was a really cool spell card with Fossil Fusion. You could do that and bring out monsters from a certain, I don't even know how to call it exactly, like a Paleozoic era, and then evolve them to a Mesozoic era. It was really interesting. I love the concept of the deck. It was a rock-based archetype. He even used Notorious Fossil Dynite, had completely different effect in the anime, but it's still considered to be Jim's card. So yeah, rock monsters have some interesting cards, and I think they could use kind of a support for the deck, but while introducing a new archetype at the exact same time. Number 8, tennis cards, Harrington, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. I think this deck was one of the most intriguing ones out of the one-shot decks and the filler episodes of GX. It had a lot of them, but I think this one was the one that felt more like an archetype. All the other decks was like a mismatch of random cards people used, but this actually had a certain strategy that strived for a win condition. It was mostly a burn deck that used cards to deal 1500 points of damage exactly, which is a reference to the 15 points you get when you're playing tennis, which I think was really awesome. And it had a very, very weird card. I mean, I think card was called Deuce, and if both players had 1,000 life points, then it would ignore life, and the first person to hit twice in a row would win the game. So yeah, I think this card would be really interesting to see how Konami would print it in real life. But still, it wasn't the best kind of deck, but I'm pretty sure such archetypes that have a certain playstyle with a little bit of tweaks, they could be really decent in today's modern game. Not meta, but still a playable deck for the fan base to enjoy. Number 7, Clear, Fujiwara Yusuke. The Season 4 of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX is one of the most underrated seasons. Not a lot of people have seen it because we never got dubbed. And this specific deck has two cards printed. It has Clear Vice Dragon and Clear World. Just two cards out of a whole archetype. Fujiwara used an entire deck based around the Clear archetype. It was not the most competitive one. It had kind of mediocre monsters. Even the field spell was nerfed when it was released from the anime to the TCG. Not only does it cost life points to keep around every turn, but also the negative effects of the attributes are a bit weakened. But still, the deck had. It's the theme of the deck is that its monsters, well, technically being dark attribute in the card itself, they are not affected by Clear World, and that was translated in the anime that they don't have an attribute which cannot really exist in the game. So they tried to do it as close to it as possible. So yeah, Fujiwara is one of the greatest characters in GX. And again, season 4, not a very visited season, and we'll come back to it later in the video as I will discuss another deck from this season that should be released. Number 6, Orichalcos, Darts. I think most people would agree with this deck. It's one that we've known for such a long time. We're going back to dual monsters, and it has a few cards. It had, of course, the Seal of Orichalcos, the original one, Orichalcos Suneros, which the effect was completely different from what it was in the anime. And they recently, not that recently, Soul Fusion, I think, they printed Divine Serpent Ge, but it still has a lot of cards that have not get printed. Orichalcos Gygas, Orichalcos Kitora, Orichalcos Malevolence, so many good cards, Deuteros, Tritos. And I think it's past its prime where we considered these kinds of decks to be completely broken. We were saying the same things about Time Lords, that the deck was unfair, and yes, back in the 5Ds era, it was really unfair, but when it got printed, the deck did almost nothing, and the power creep really helps even those quote-unquote broken anime decks to be released in the game and not be broken, of course. So yeah, Dart's one of the original villains of the Yu-Gi-Oh anime. His deck was never fully released, so I'm pretty sure Konami could expand a little bit more on the Orichalcos archetype. Now, number 5, we're going to Arc 5, and we're going to take a look at Thor Prisoners, Sergei's deck. This was a weird deck. It's a kind of a masochistic deck that you take away your own life points in order to power up the boss monster, Vandar Lizuma, which is a fusion monster, but it also incorporates synchros because it was the Synchro Dimension era. And it was kind of a, I think, I want to say risky deck. It's not a deck that people could actually use in a modern game because you can't exactly control how much damage you're going to take if you're relying on your opponent to deal you damage. So maybe this strategy would be mostly played with cards that cost life points, so you can cut your own life points, or you don't need to lower your life points that much in order to power up Vandar Zuma. It's tricky. Konami can't do it. I'm pretty sure they can figure out a way to make this deck playable without getting killed by your opponent in the first 2 turns. Number 4, back to the GX era, and of course, we're going back to Season 4. We have a Night Shroud or Darkness deck, the Darkness deck. Again, 2 cards exist, Darkness Neosphere and Darkness Destroyer, but he played so many cards that we don't have. The field spell, yeah, I can understand a field spell that sets 5 continuous traps from the deck could actually be broken even in today's game because you would not abuse them as the actual strategy of the deck. You would use them as an advantage and do something with those back rows. But it had a really interesting concept where even you yourself were not able to check your face down cards. You had to control a monster that had the effect to let you confirm your face down cards, which I thought was very strange for a mechanic because it never says in the rulebook that you cannot check your face down cards. So maybe the field spell will declare that, and because it randomly reset all the continuous traps during the end phase so that you could use them over and over again. And that was pretty much the playstyle of the deck. And then it had some beaters, but the beaters kind of exist. There were some monsters that have not been released. He used a really good monster that allowed you to declare any card name and take that from your opponent's deck or extra deck and special summon it to your field, ignoring summoning conditions. That would be busted. I'm pretty sure that cannot be allowed in the game. It would be so generic unless you need to discard a card with darkness in its name or something to make it more archetype specific. But again, these final villain decks that used to be super broken, not anymore. Actually, Dawn Thousand's deck, I haven't included in this list because I'm pretty sure Numero Network would be an unfair card in any time, even in 2050. A card that negates anything and allowing you to activate any card you want from your opponent's deck. So you can get the best card and use the worst card out of their deck for each scenario. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that can be made into an actual playable, healthy card for the game. But Darkness deck, by far not broken anymore. And I'm pretty sure Konami could easily give it a try and release it for the game. And now we're in the top three, and we're going back to Vrains, and I'm talking about Armados Legio Lightning's deck. Armados Legio was a really fun deck, I think. It was kind of a spam deck that utilized the extra link, but the problem with that is that it used Judgment Arrows. I'm not sure if Konami plans on printing that card. If you're not talking what I'm talking, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's the link spell that when you have a link in the main monster zone pointing downwards, then you can activate this continuous card from your hand. It has 3 arrows pointing middle up, right up, and left up. And you can link summon monsters because there are arrows there, and when the monster that this card is pointing to battles, then its attack points are doubled. It was an unsearchable card. It still would be if Konami printed this. So I don't know how consistent it would be, but giving so many free arrows could be a problem for the deck. I'm not sure if Konami wants to print that card. But back to Armados Legio. The deck's main purpose was defending itself until it had the tools to pretty much OTK. All the monsters have kind of a defensive effects. Some blocked attacks, some blocked damage, some blocked destruction, and they pretty much had a way to replenish their hands. He even used the extra link, but he needed Judgment Arrows to do it, so without that continuous spell, you would not be able to do it, even if the deck was printed. But I really enjoyed seeing this deck in the anime, and I think it would be really fun if Konami actually made it. Number two, Backdeal Monsters. And this, I'm pretty sure, is the most wanted deck for the anime exclusive ones to get printed by pretty much everyone. I haven't put it in number one because there's one deck that I enjoyed even more than this, but still an amazing deck to look and watch during the anime. Valon's Armor deck. A classic one. Everyone wants this deck. Really, really bad to get printed. I'm not sure why Konami still has not printed it. We have pretty much almost every deck from the Duel Monsters era. There were so many anime decks in the Duel Monsters era, but Konami kept printing more and more, and now we're getting closer to having all of them. But this is one that still has not get printed. But it's such a fun deck. It was fun to watch. I'm not sure how fun it would be to play, but if you could just roleplay as Valen, would still be really cool. The fact that he wore his monsters as an armor and he attacked himself, his opponent and his opponent's monsters. That was so amazing to watch. Still a very nostalgic deck. I think if if you want to take out of any of these decks and print one, I'm pretty sure the majority would pick this one. I'm pretty sure it's the most fun favorite deck here and the one that everyone wants. But there's one deck that I enjoyed more personally, and I am talking about Spectres Son Avalon from Yu-Gi-Oh! Reigns. Sun Avalons were a deck that relied on your opponent attacking you and then healing back all the life points you lost using your Sun Avalon monsters, and then using and summoning your Sunvine monsters from the extra deck for defense and attack. It was a really versatile deck. I think if Konami was to print any of these decks exactly how it was in the anime, this one would be the most competitive. I don't think it would be meta, but it's still able to win games. I've tested it on YGO Pro. I think it's a really decent deck. With a few buffs, it could actually be a tier 2 strategy. It kind of relies on your opponent, but not that much because there are ways to summon your monsters even when your opponent doesn't even attack you. The plant monsters have some of the better cards out there. We've got Lonefire Blossom. It uses vanilla monsters, so you can use cards like Swing of Memories, Try White to spam a lot of monsters on the field. You have Painful Decision, Super Unexpected Die. You have Rescue Rabbit to get your monster to the field. Using vanillas is a very beneficial way of playing the deck. You have cards like Glow Bulb. You have so many good support, and the deck actually had really good monsters in its arsenal. It had good attack, had good defense. I think it was the most well-balanced deck, and we did see a lot with it. And there are ways to even use the extra link with the deck, so it has a lot of potential. And being a Vrains deck gives me hope that it will be printed eventually, probably this year in Battles of Legends, because we did see some Anime Arc 5 decks like Battle Wasps or the Rising Stars that were an anime exclusive deck for over a year, but they actually got printed in Battles of Legends. So that gives me hope that some of these Vrains decks will eventually get printed. But yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Leave us your thoughts in the comments. If there is an Ultimate deck that I didn't mention that you would really like to see printed, give us your lists and why you like each and every one deck. And with every one of these likes, we send a message to Konami to print all of these decks someday. So thanks for watching. See you next time.